This is TOEFL IBT speaking test, and this test evaluates your ability to communicate in English in an academic setting. It consists of 4 tasks. Task 1, express an opinion on a familiar topic.
Listening summary, extended. You hear a conversation between 2 students outside the library. The woman strongly disagrees with the university's new policy. She explains that while the majority of students might not use the library overnight, there is still a significant group of students, like her, who do. She says she works a part-time job in the evenings and can only study after midnight. The quiet and structured environment of the library helps her concentrate better than her noisy shared apartment. She also believes that many international students, who may struggle with distractions at home or have different time zones to consider, rely on the overnight hours. Lastly, she argues that instead of reducing hours, the university should explore alternatives like rotating student workers or using security personnel to keep the space open without full staffing.
Lecture summary, extended. In the lecture, The professor explains the endowment effect through a study conducted with college students. In the experiment, some students were randomly given a university-branded coffee mug. Later, they were asked how much money they would accept to give up the mug. On average, they wanted around $7. But when students who didn't receive the mug were asked how much they would pay to get one, they only offered about $3. The professor highlights that the mugs had the same objective value, but students who owned them placed more emotional and personal value on them. He explains that this happens because ownership can create a subtle psychological attachment, making people view the object as an extension of themselves. Task 4, Integrated Speaking, Academic Lecture, Lecture Summary, Extended. The professor discusses two main strategies that animals use to cope with harsh seasonal environments: hibernation and migration. He begins with hibernation, explaining that animals like bears and ground squirrels enter a state of dormancy during the winter months. Their body temperature drops significantly, and their metabolic rate slows down, allowing them to survive long periods without food. He adds that hibernating animals prepare by eating large amounts in advance to build up fat reserves. Next, he talks about migration, where animals move to a more favorable environment when conditions become too extreme. He gives the example of monarch butterflies, which travel over 2,000 miles from Canada to Mexico to escape the cold and find food. He also mentions Arctic terns, which have one of the longest migrations of any bird, flying from the Arctic to Antarctica each year. The professor concludes by emphasizing that while both strategies are different, they serve the same evolutionary purpose: helping animals survive and reproduce by avoiding environmental extremes.
I disagree with the idea that it's better to make decisions quickly. While acting fast might be helpful in urgent situations, most decisions benefit from careful thought. For instance, when I was choosing which university to attend, I spent weeks researching different programs, comparing tuition fees, and talking to current students. That process helped me avoid making a choice I might later regret. Quick decisions often ignore important details and can lead to mistakes, especially when it comes to long-term goals like education or career. Taking time allows for deeper reflection, better planning, and ultimately, more successful outcomes. The woman strongly disagrees with the university's new policy to close the library at midnight during exam week. She argues that many students, including herself, depend on the library's quiet environment to study late at night, especially because her dorm room is often noisy and full of distractions. In her case, she works a part-time job in the evenings, so the only time she can focus on studying is after midnight. She also points out that international students or those with shared living spaces may face similar challenges. Additionally, she believes the university should explore other options, such as hiring student workers, using security staff, or rotating shifts to keep the library open without requiring a full staff. She feels the current decision is inconsiderate of students with different needs and schedules and could negatively impact their academic performance during an already stressful period. The reading introduces the concept of the endowment effect, a phenomenon in behavioral economics where people tend to place a higher value on things simply because they own them. Even if the item was recently acquired or has little objective value, ownership alone increases its perceived worth. In the lecture, the professor illustrates this with an experiment involving college students and university-branded coffee mugs. Some students were given mugs for free, and later, when asked how much they would sell them for, they typically said around $7. However, students who didn't receive mugs were only willing to pay about $3 to buy one. The professor explains that even though both groups evaluated the same object, ownership made the first group feel emotionally connected to the mug, which inflated its value in their minds. This clearly demonstrates how the endowment effect influences our decision-making in ways that aren't always rational. The professor describes two main strategies animals use to survive extreme seasonal changes: hibernation and migration. First, hibernation involves animals like bears and ground squirrels entering a state of deep dormancy during winter. Their body temperature drops significantly, and their metabolism slows down, which helps them conserve energy since food is scarce. Before hibernating, these animals eat large amounts to build up fat reserves that sustain them throughout the cold months. Second, migration is when animals move to warmer climates to avoid harsh conditions. The professor gives the example of monarch butterflies, which travel over 2,000 miles from Canada to Mexico every year to escape the cold and find food. He also mentions Arctic terns, which have one of the longest migration routes, flying between the Arctic and Antarctica annually. Both hibernation and migration are effective survival strategies that help animals deal with difficult seasonal environments by either conserving energy or relocating to better habitats.